Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session today on interdisciplinary sustainability education at UBC, innovating to prepare students for a complex and changing world. My name is Oliver Lane. I'm the manager for teaching and learning at the Sustainability Hub here on the Vancouver campus, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for joining us. We have 90 minutes ahead of us to discuss and learn about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary education, what that looks like at UBC. And I'm very excited and very grateful to have four amazing faculty members with us that are going to be sharing their experience, their perspectives on this kind of work in their own spaces. I'll introduce them to you very shortly, but I just wanted to cover a couple of things before we get started. A big thank you to the CTLT, the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, for organizing these spaces, providing these opportunities for learning and discussion. For me, as a person that works in a unit that is dedicated to supporting students, staff, and faculty in advancing sustainability teaching and learning, these kind of spaces are super important so that we can give more visibility, bring more visibility to the work that faculty members are doing across different disciplines and in different faculties and departments. So thank you, a big thank you to CTLT for allowing us to do this work and sharing this with the rest of the UBC community. I want to also, as we get started, acknowledge that the UBC Vancouver campus, where a lot of us work, is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I'm located right now, I'm working from home. So I'm in East Vancouver, which is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So I encourage you, if you want to, invite you to share in the chat. If you're joining from a different place, different Indigenous territory, to let us know where you're connecting from today. Some of you might know that June is National Indigenous History Month. So an invitation to explore things going on in Vancouver or in your community. Here in this slide, some resources that were shared with me by a nonprofit organization that is working with Indigenous advisors and partners to put together this list of resources that include workshops, courses, books, educator resources for post-secondary to elementary school, a number of things that are available, super interesting. There's a link right at the bottom right there that takes you to this list. You can feel free to take a photo or do a screen capture or connect with me and I can share the link with you later on. And also June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada. And I'm sure at UBC, at the Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Center, there'll be some activities. So I encourage you to check that out and be part of that and be a witness to what's presented there and what's been discussed. I particularly, because I'm in East Vancouver, tend to go to activities in Trout Lake or Grandview Park on Commercial Drive. I invite you to check out what's going on in your local communities as a great opportunity, a very important day indeed. To connect with reconciliation and our role there as members of this community and society. So very briefly, the Sustainability Hub. Some of you might have heard of who we are. We are a unit on the Vancouver campus. We are located in the CERS building. That's the Center for Interactive Research and Sustainability on West Mall. We basically support, as I said earlier, we support students, staff, and faculty in advancing our sustainability goals, or UBC sustainability and climate action goals. We have grants for faculty members. We have leadership opportunities for students. We also lead the climate emergency work on campus. We coordinate that work that's happening through different units and through different departments and through different champions. UBC declared a climate emergency in 2019, and there's a task force report with a series of recommendations, and we have the role, we've been tasked to coordinate that work. We also produce events and resources for teaching and learning around sustainability and climate change. So if you ever if you're a student or staff, community member or faculty, and you're looking to get more involved and look for support in advancing sustainability, please do contact us, contact me directly or anybody in our unit, and we're happy to have a conversation. So for today, our agenda, pretty straightforward. We have our amazing panel with us. And I'm putting forward a couple of questions to them so that they can share their expertise and the work that they've been doing and their passion for this work. And we'll open it up for questions from the audience as well. And then we'll have a sort of a second round of with a specific question, which is around UBC's role as an institution. What can UBC do to elevate this kind of work, to really make it a lot more meaningful, a lot more impactful, coming from an institution in a coordinated way? So hopefully we'll have a good discussion. I'm sure we will have a great discussion on those topics. And we'll have time, as I say, time for questions from the audience. And so feel free to, whenever you have a question, you can put it in the chat. I'll do my best to try to keep track of that and bring that into the discussion. So very briefly, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary education and learning, what does that mean? We talked with the panel members in preparing for this session. We didn't want to jump into trying to find the definition because we know there are multiple definitions, but we know there's some shared characteristics that a lot of people agree on. And so we'll share that just to get started, and then we'll hear from the different panel members on their take on these. So interdisciplinary education empowers students to combine frameworks and concepts from multiple disciplines to examine a theme or solve a problem from different perspectives. That's one take. It offers a more complete understanding of an issue. Students understand insights from different disciplines. Students think critically. They identify their own prejudices and accept the unknown. It's an interesting one. Students will gain the skill set to tackle complexity and change effectively throughout their careers. And I think that's one of the key things. The challenges that we're facing seem to be more and more complex, and we really need the different perspectives that we need those involved to actually reach solutions that are impactful. And it often requires collaboration between multiple educators to properly execute. Then transdisciplinary education, some definitions out there as well for this concept: collaboration between disciplines to create a cohesive curriculum in which students collaborate to solve multifaceted problems. It requires innovation, cooperation, and intentionality. It brings integration of different disciplines in a harmonious manner to construct new knowledge and uplift the learner to higher domains of cognitive abilities and sustained knowledge and skills. And lastly, as it applies to research, which I thought was interesting because this could connect clearly to education, transdisciplinary research includes the participation of non-academic stakeholders in the production of knowledge. So there you go. These are different elements, and there's more elements and more ways to define this, probably depending on the discipline you're coming from or the experience that you bring. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panel that's joining us today. I'll very briefly introduce them, and then I'll let them also talk a bit more about who they are, where they're coming from, and how they're approaching this work. So we have with us Jenny Peterson from Political Science from the Faculty of Arts, Gabriel Potvin from Chemical and Biological Engineering, Faculty of Applied Science, and Jenny and Gabriel are working together. They're co-teaching a jointly offered course called Humanitarian Engineering, Politics and Practice. And it's an invitation to explore engineering design and tackle real-world humanitarian and sustainability challenges. Then we have Denise Gabriel, who's joining us from Integrated Sciences program from the Faculty of Science. And this is slightly different. So this is not two faculties coming together, but already a program that is designed originally as interdisciplinary within one faculty. And this is the program is an alternative to a traditional major or honors program for students whose interests cross disciplinary boundaries within the sciences. And lastly, Rob Van Weinsberg from Educational Studies from the Faculty of Education. And Rob's been doing interdisciplinary work for many, many years. And he is leading a Master's of Education in Sustainability, Regeneration, and Resilience, a collaborative and interdisciplinary effort between UBC's Faculty of Education, Faculty of Land and Food Systems, and Faculty of Forestry. So this is a whole program that has collaboration from 3 different faculties. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to the 4 of you. We'll get Jenny to start with these guiding questions, and I'll remove the slide so we can see everybody's faces more easily. But so tell us about your work and your approach to interdisciplinary sustainability teaching, and then why is this important to you, and how do you think that contributes to preparing students for a meaningful career? Over to you, Jenny.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Oliver, for bringing us all together for this conversation. A bit of my background, I'm in the Department of Political Science. I'm an associate professor of teaching, but I'm a bit of a unicorn in that I do not have a political science degree, which I only really talk openly about now that I have tenure, because I do think interdisciplinarity is somewhat undervalued. And so I've always kind of felt a bit uncomfortable with my interdisciplinarity, even though, like I say, all three of my degrees, my undergraduate, my both my master's and my PhD, were in interdisciplinary programs. But I always felt the closest affinity to political science, which is how I've ended up in political science. I feel like I was kind of roped into this conversation, this wonderful conversation, because of my work on the humanitarian engineering program in particular, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I also wanted to mention some of the other interdisciplinary work that I do within the Faculty of Arts. I've helped create something called the Human Rights Collective, which, as I was hearing Oliver describe the Sustainability Hub, I feel like we're kind of sister programs in the sense that the Human Rights Collective is also meant to be a space to facilitate dialogue and to provide both a physical space, but also a conceptual space for students, staff, and faculty who are broadly working on what we would call rights-based approaches. We recognize that there's people working in disciplines that maybe don't consider themselves human rights experts, but they're working at cross purposes or on similar purposes. So we've worked to create a space to allow people working in health sciences, food security, history, political science, engineering, anyone who's kind of work, both students, staff, and faculty, whose work kind of relates to trying to address what are broadly considered to be human rights issues. We aim to be a space there. So we run an interdisciplinary course on human rights where sustainability and the link between environmental rights and human rights. So we look at the link between those things, asking, are human rights only about humans, for example? And we discuss some of the literature on that. We have a resource catalog where we compile interdisciplinary resources related to human rights. And we also run a range of seminars and sessions drawing on people from data science, engineering, various science disciplines, as well as across the Faculty of Arts. So if folks are looking, if that resonates with you, and you feel that your work is rights-based and interdisciplinary, this is also an invitation to get in touch with me and see the ways in which the Human Rights Collective might be a good space for you to work as well. I think one of the reasons why I do the work at the Human Rights Collective and the Humanitarian Engineering program that I'm going to talk about in a moment is it comes from a place of humility, a recognition that my discipline doesn't have all the answers, but a recognition that sometimes in the academy, we're meant to feel that our disciplines have the answer to a problem. And so I approach a lot of my, or I hope I do, Gabriel might think differently, but I try to approach a lot of my interdisciplinary work with as much humility and really focusing on the idea of unlearning. I've started doing a lot of kind of reading and thinking about unlearning as well. And that kind of underpins a lot of the work that I do. And probably the space where I've had to have the most humility and engage in the most unlearning is in the work that I've done with Gabriel on the humanitarian engineering course. Gabriel and I first met at Vantage College years ago, which was a first year program, and we had a few conversations then. We consulted and worked a little bit together on a student-directed seminar, which was only for engineering students at that point. It was a student-directed seminar for applied science students, and Gabriel would occasionally come to me and ask questions about the humanitarian side of things. My previous job was at the Humanitarian Studies Department in the UK. And that kind of got us thinking about, should we do something more, more long-term or more kind of developed? And so we actually had a sustainability grant a few years back, pre-COVID, to work on this. And we developed a syllabus for a humanitarian engineering course that would bring together political science and engineering students. We had to go through just a bit of background. We had to get it approved both in the Arts Curriculum Committee as well as the Applied Science Curriculum Committee. So in terms of the bureaucracy, it was it was quite a lot. And then COVID hit and we weren't able to teach it. We wanted to teach it in person for the first time, not online. So we were finally able to run it this past year for the first time. Gabriel and I co-teach every class. So there's not poli-sci weeks and then engineering weeks. We developed every lecture, co-taught every lecture by ourselves, which was time intensive, but very much worth it, going back to my kind of humility and unlearning approach. Students worked with community partners. I'll maybe let Gabriel talk a little bit more about that, but students were working on real engineering problems with NGOs who were working on the ground in various countries. But they had to develop technological solutions that were also cognizant of culture, politics, economics. And so what the result was were hopefully technological interventions that are much more sustainable, because they take into account what we know from social science about the reasons why technology often fails. And so that was a really exciting course. We ran it for the first time. We brought in lots of guest speakers, and we had really good feedback from students, which again, Gabriel did all this wonderful survey work on that. So I might let him talk a little bit more about that. The second question I was asked to talk about is why it's important to me. Like I say, as someone who's always worked in an interdisciplinary space, it's a weird question for me in some ways, because it's just comes so naturally to me that you need to bring people together. Why wouldn't you? But what I've learned, particularly from working for the first time in my life in a discipline, so being at UBC and being in political science and being in a discipline, it really it really surfaced for me the degree to which we're potentially training students who are not always capable of talking to students in other disciplines. That we're creating kind of students who are experts and intelligent and doing wonderful work within the confines of a discipline, but then their ability to communicate their knowledge beyond their discipline is seemingly limited. So for me, one of the main reasons for me why it's important is students need to be able to share their knowledge, transmit their knowledge to non-specialist audiences and to people outside of their disciplines. I think in the same way, students and some people talk about echo chambers along ideological lines where people only kind of discuss or just, have discussions with people who agree with them on ideological grounds. I sometimes worry that we're seeing the same thing, the same kind of echo chambers, but along disciplinary grounds as well. And so I also see interdisciplinarity as a way of trying to also train our students to have conversations with people who potentially disagree with them, disagree with what the solution is or could be as well. And I guess the last point before I hand it over to Gabriel is just a very kind of more nuts and bolts, less kind of pedagogical or ethical region is also the networking opportunities. When I think back to all of my degrees and all of my professional development and how I ended up where I ended up now, speaking to all of you, so much of that was through networking that took place during my student years, both undergraduate, master's, and PhD. And so I also think it's really important from a professional development point of view that our students are expanding their professional development networks at a really important but young age. And I will say that was one of the most beautiful things to come for me out of our humanitarian engineering class is hearing from students who took the class last September that they're still friends with each other, and they my poli-sci students are hanging out with and still meeting with the engineering students in their department, and just knowing that these kind of professional and personal relationships are potentially things that the students can take forward with them in terms of their career aspirations and goals. So I'm going to end it there for my answer to the first two questions, and I guess I'm handing it over to Gabriel.
Thanks so much. It'll make it easy for me. We can do it a little bit kind of shorter here. So thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. So my name's Gabriel. I'm a associate professor of teaching in chemical and biological engineering. I've been involved in interdisciplinary stuff in a variety of kind of contexts. So I'll talk a little bit more about what Jen was talking about, our humanitarian course. But I've worked with Vantage College. That was interdisciplinary, the integration of kind of technical and language training. Did a lot of work with that. I see some people that were in Vantage as well. The audience today. I teach the Impact of Tech on Society course that all engineers have to take to kind of graduate in Canada, which is by nature interdisciplinary. Happy to talk a bit more about that if we want this the one chance for engineers to really be forced to go outside of the kind of technical field. Develop some kind of resources for engineering economics, for sustainability considerations, integrating that into decision making for engineers. So those are the kind of flavors of some of the projects that I've kind of worked on, but really the reason for being kind of involved here is in engineering. What separates engineers from not, I mean, there's many things that separates engineers from non-engineers, but the non-joke one is design skills, right? The ability to apply this technical knowledge to the design process. But what I keep telling my students is that, you know, real problems require real solutions, and real solutions are kind of complicated. It's not just the laws of physics, but it involves people. People are complicated, and to be a good engineer, you therefore have to understand kind of people, or be able to work with people, be able to take their kind of perspective, which is something that in a 4-year engineering degree, I'll argue we don't necessarily do particularly well. Sure, we have some projects, we have some deliverables associated with it, but we have a lot of students that don't necessarily realize the importance of this. And I have students that come back, they want to have a coffee with me, they want to have a beer with me years after they graduate, and they come back and they say, look, like, no one told me, like, my job is mostly talking to people, right? And it's not just kind of doing equations. So there's something kind of missing here. So just for this humanitarian kind of project, this came out like Jen said, it was a student that kind of approached me to supervise a student-directed seminars and balloon from there. But it's also through these conversations where I would talk to engineers. We talk about engineering failures, where we have a technical solution to a problem, let's say a water treatment plant that works flawlessly in the technical side, but that people aren't using. And if someone's not using a design, the design is a failure. And a lot of engineering students, the reflex was, well, we solved the problem. If they don't want to use a solution, that's their problem, right? That's their issue. That's not ours. We did our job. Which obviously is not a particularly good way to go about this, right? So that in combination with the, let's argue superiority complex that some engineers kind of might have, which is also kind of not conducive to good design. And at the same time, I talk to people on the art side, and they make sweeping declarations like, access to clean drinking water is a human right. And then they're like, great, I agree. So how do we make it happen? How do we give everyone access? It's like, oh, well, we did the hard work by declaring it a human right. You guys, the engineers, you can sort out the plumbing. And of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that as well. So there's a lack of kind of appreciation here for what each other can do. On the pedagogical side, like Jen was saying, we do tend to have our disciplinary echo chambers, and not to venture kind of too far outside from this, to have these opportunities to work with others, which is an incredibly valuable professional skill that employers are looking for. We don't have that many chances to do this. So we created this course. So Jen gave a good kind of summary of it. So what we did, we partnered with NGOs. So it was our first kind of iteration back in September. We had about 30 engineering students and 30 political science art students. We worked with 7 different NGOs. We ended up with 9 projects, and students would work in mixed teams. So about half engineers, half poli-sci students, and kind of work together to come up with these comprehensive proposal reports for the NGOs that we're working with to address these real world humanitarian challenges. So like Jen said, we co-taught every lecture, but I think more than this, we openly disagreed with each other and argued, or agreed sometimes, with each other in front of the class, and we kind of challenge our positions, respectfully and openly, as a way to model this interdisciplinary, kind of polite professional discourse, which students thought was quite weird at first, and some of them never quite got super comfortable with this. But then that became a highlight of the course and the data that we have at the end, right? Like this ability, this realization that it's okay to approach things from different perspectives. By exploring those perspectives, this is something good. It leads to better outcomes at the end. And, one of the most proud things we had from this course is we have students at the end saying things like, we could have done this course just as engineers or as kind of poli-sci students. but the projects would not have been as good, right? It's really kind of coming together and doing this and getting each other's perspectives and learning that the final designs that we have, these final solutions that we have for our kind of NGOs are much better than they otherwise would have been, right? So we see this realization of the value, and along the way, sure, they make friends, but more importantly than this, they get to talk to people outside their field and be comfortable doing this, which is going to serve them wherever they end up, professionally speaking. So if anybody has any questions about that course, we're happy to kind of discuss the ways we did it, the way we tried to avoid a divide and conquer kind of approach to these things. So students really benefited from this. We're going to run it again in September. So I'm in the process now of starting to kind of set that up. So we're very excited for this, and we're quite happy with that outcome. And Jen and I, at the end, we're still friends after the course. We weren't sure. There was a couple times during the course that this was kind of difficult, but it was really good. And to be honest, it's not just the students, but I feel we also leave this course kind of better practitioners of our own disciplines, own fields, and we have a better appreciation for what the others do. So I think this was a kind of great experience that is not so available in a university setting like this, and it's for some good and some kind of bad reasons. But we can talk about what the UBC or other institutions can do to facilitate these types of opportunities for student training, amongst other things. So with that, I think that gives the kind of essential. Happy to expand on kind of any of this as to why it's important for students, for engineering students in particular. It's also to become better engineers, which I strongly believe is the case. They can be better designers through this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration, but we can talk some more after that. I'll hand over to, I think, Denise, you're next. Yeah.
Thanks, Gabriel. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here today. I am Denise, and as Oliver mentioned, I am in the integrated sciences. So I, like Jenny, come from a very, very vast interdisciplinary background in my own education. My bachelor's is in biology and psychology. I started my early grad work in neuroscience and then transferred into biology and anthropology. So I have sciences and arts all mixed into one. I also taught at Quest University Canada for 6 years before landing in the integrated sciences at UBC. And for those of you who don't know Quest's model, it's a liberal arts and sciences institution modeled off of similar institutions in the US. And so the classroom is intentionally interdisciplinary, and the students have to take courses from across all the different disciplines. Many of the courses are co-taught. So this is something that we received a lot of training in and experience. And so a lot of my teaching experience has come from that. I was within the life science division within that, but taught a wide variety of courses and developed them as well. And then integrated sciences at UBC. So Oliver gave a little introduction as to what it is, but we are within the Faculty of Science, but our students, they come into our program in their second year, and for their third and fourth years, they are taking courses that integrate 2 to 3 scientific disciplines. Sometimes they combine, for example, an arts discipline in there as well. So it might be 2 science and 1 arts that come together, and they design a curriculum that helps them achieve their specific academic and career goals based on that. And so I teach within the integrated sciences. So our courses, which they have to take a 7-credit load of, they are inherently interdisciplinary because we are talking to students that come from a vast background within the sciences and beyond. And so our courses are meant to be kind of those more interdisciplinary, kind of higher connections level courses. And this for me has continued to be a challenge that I always am confronted with, because I am speaking to students with various backgrounds and designing courses that all of us can kind of go on the journey together, and they're upper level science courses. So, you know, I teach the evolution of human cognition, for example, and so have to catch students up to speed on evolutionary theory as well as neuroscientific theory and anthropology and in a 13-week course. So this is something that I have a lot of experience in doing. We also, within the integrated sciences, run a series of courses called Systems and Sustainability, or Systems Approaches to Regional Sustainability. And we have 3 different regional foci that we look at. There's a Vancouver-based curriculum, and then 2 field courses, one in Hawaii and one in Iceland. And they all are addressing similar content, but with different regional case studies that we're examining. The Vancouver-based one is taught by myself, and within that, I have a lot of invited lectures, and I'm really building up the community engagement side of things to do community engaged learning. I've been working with Cecil to do that, and I've got a course workbook that I have been developing that will be available to actually any courses within UBC that are looking to put a systems framework into their course. It can run alongside pretty much any curriculum that is already developed. So if that's something that you're interested in examining for your courses, we are almost done with that. It should be ready by the end of the month. And then our field courses are co-taught by myself and then 2 instructors in EOAS. So different backgrounds coming together there. So I would say my approach to teaching is predicated on kind of community learning together, building narratives, understanding how to visualize knowledge. So I do a lot of visualization, concept maps, systems diagrams, that kind of thing. And then within is really the art of asking questions, getting students to see the world through a series of questions instead of just the knowledge seeking, this answer seeking that that can sometimes be their comfort zone. They like to know what the answer is. So that would be kind of my, I guess, my background and approach to interdisciplinarity, why I find it important. While it has been obviously my pathway the entire way through my career, and as I have engaged with it more, I see that, you know, many careers, particularly outside of academia, don't exist in disciplinary silos. And I've had a lot of students who end up coming back, you know, after they've graduated and telling me about the different work that they are participating in, and that they're using systems frameworks, for example, on a daily basis, and they didn't even know that this existed. And so I find that it gives them skills to be able to operate in a wide range of career trajectories, which I think is really important. And then I also am a big believer, and I think my fellow speakers would say the same, is that most of the challenges that we are confronted with in this world are complex and do not stay within disciplines, and a lot of the time we get stuck in our bounded rationalities of those disciplines, of trying to solve it through certain perspectives without necessarily communicating to each other. And so one of the things that I teach my students a lot that comes into human cognition is that we are as successful as a species as we are because we're a collective brain, not because we are a individual brain. And so the more that we can learn how to communicate to each other across these different boundaries, the more that we can find solutions that are actually going to be change making within the world. And so I would say that that is why it leads to a meaningful and impactful career. So I will pass it off to Rob.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I I'll just try to be maybe a little bit quick here, because I think a lot of this can come out in the questions. I'm a professor in educational studies, which is one of 5 departments in the Faculty of Education. My PhD is actually in sociology. My background is a combination of social movements, environmental justice issues, and sustainability. So I'm generally coming at this from that particular lens. And I agree with what's been said about the importance of transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach to sustainability. My postdoc work was in a big project at UBC that involved 39 academics and a myriad of undergrad, graduate, and postdoctoral students. It was called the Georgia Basin Futures Project. And, that really started to alert me to the power of a variety of disciplines weighing in on the topics. I continued to explore that a little bit through Great Northern Way, which was at one time a brownfield site, and there was going to be 4 post-secondary institutions located on it. I'm not sure if people remember that. It's now the home for the brand new Emily Carr campus. But at the time, it was the beginning of an interinstitutional combination along with multiple disciplines. And that is also quite interesting because you have a BCIT or an Emily Carr involved, and they can be similar disciplines, but approaches can be quite different. And I learned a tremendous amount, lots of inter kind of campus collaborations with students, with faculty members. And then after that, I continued on with that kind of work, and I've done it my whole career. I think that's what Oliver mentioned at the beginning. The only other thing that I'll mention that's not right in line with what I want to talk about is I do lead a cohort of teachers candidates. So there's 36 students who graduate each year from Teachers College at UBC, and they have a kind of sustainability overlay. We've done it for 7 years now. I think we've got 250 or so teachers out there, and they're going to have careers filled with classrooms. And so that part of it's quite interesting because you begin to think about impacts and what classrooms that look a particular way can do given who graduates from them. So that's kind of my background. There's a question out there of our kind of approach to interdisciplinarity and its value to students, and I kind of encapsulate those 2 questions in talking about education for sustainability. That's kind of my primary area. I believe that sustainability is a social movement, and it's a collective effort to make change. I know it looks disparate, but I think there's a kind of shared belief that we have to come up with a new kind of narrative of progress and of modernity. And I think that's what all these different organizations around the world are doing. I believe there's a home for our classrooms as organizations that can do work that contribute to sustainability. And that's where I use the term for. So education for sustainability. I think about classroom design in that respect. Pedagogically, there's a variety of things that I use, but I think the primary underlying principle is what I call a theory of human action. I believe we're creatures of habit. I believe most of what is responsible for unsustainability is everyday actions that are habitual and routine. And I design classrooms that help us to disrupt those, because the way that you learn about routine is by disrupting routine. So I do a lot of work just asking people to do simple things differently and then cataloging the number of changes that involves. And then you can think about those individual kinds of things in terms of social institutions, social structures, and understand that habits can scale up to the point that we as a society can have bad habits. And I think that's important to make that connection between the individual and the social or the social structural, because that's where I believe transformative learning resides, that interplay between the individual and the collective. I think the other piece that I'll mention, and this is a bit more controversial, is this idea of competencies. Whether there are a kind of predetermined set of skills, attitudes, and predispositions that people need to have to make a contribution to complex issues. I know we need flexibility amongst those, but I do believe that there are competencies that we need to achieve. And that's where I believe that interdisciplinary collaboration comes from. because certain disciplines do a great job of bringing forward certain competencies. I will say that underlying all of these competencies needs to be a better understanding of what we're capable of as a species. I think that we have skills that we've almost forgotten that we have to be reinvigorated, and that's where I believe indigeneity plays a tremendous role. And the kinds of things like understanding our relationship to the non-human world. We're at a place right now where we're desperate to figure out ways to get along with other species and to work together. So I think that I think competencies are really important, but I really think that the university could explore what lies underneath those, which are some of these skills and attitudes. I think the best way for me to talk about kind of how this all plays out for me in terms of this master's program is to talk about something that's coming up in about 6 weeks, and that's called the Summer Institute, which I used to launch the master's program. This Summer Institute will weave together 3 courses. So I've got an instructor from land and food systems, forestry, and education, and I've brought them together for a couple of visits. We're going to have a couple of more, and we're going to try to design 3 courses that weave together and supply the basis for an entire program, while also backfilling on kinds of content that people may not have in their background. So it's a 2-pronged approach. And the idea is that we'll spend an intense period together, and we'll have modules that essentially come from particular disciplines, and they'll build upon one another. And what we're going to try to do is engage in a series of reflections so that people can begin to think about what it is that they're learning that's new, what is resurfaced for them as previous learning, and what are the kinds of things that they think they need to know moving forward. And this Summer Institute gets a bit complex, as you can imagine, but it's also incredibly powerful. And even in the meetings that we're holding right now, before we actually host the Summer Institute, you just see light bulbs going on all over the place in terms of the faculty members that are going to participate. And I can imagine the same kinds of things go on for the students that get involved. And I think that's the power of this kind of work. I think it's what makes it really juicy to be involved in and really energizing. And I just think it's the way to go. I just think that bringing different courses together like this is the way that we're going to help to create the leaders that we need to create to deal with the complex issues that we're dealing with right now. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, everyone. I think I will just open it up for questions. If anybody has questions for any of the panelists or for all the panelists, you can just speak, just unmute yourselves or put them in the chat. Samar, go ahead.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having this discussion. Firstly, this was a really insightful conversation, and I can't wait for, the next round as well. And the question I had was for Rob in particular, because I like studying sustainability and behavior change, and I was wondering what were some of the habits that you were speaking of that we should disrupt, and how do you then build these new habits that lead to, transformational change? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. I think I mentioned that we start with the mundane. And so I'll say something as simple as come to campus tomorrow choosing a different mode of transport and catalog all of the decisions that you had to make in order to make the switch, say, from the bus to the bike. And what I'm trying to have folks highlight for themselves and to reflect on is the number of things that they do almost on an unconscious basis. And the suggestion is that some of the things that we do that aren't so good for society, aren't so great for sustainability, are things that we don't even think about, we don't even challenge. I didn't add this to what I said earlier, but I believe this sort of the other piece that I think is important is that we are creative as a species by nature. I think when we come up with challenges, we're quite good actually at coming up with an array of solutions. I don't think we've always chosen great solutions, particularly in the last little while, but one of the things that we do in the program is a social innovation research method. It's taught by Dr. Lindsay Cole. And what Lindsay tries to do is to establish a basis for people to engage in prototyping and quick failures, quick successes, and user feedback. And these kinds of things can help people test out an array of solutions. They can be compared against some values. And I guess what we're saying, Samar, is that these are small things, but we can begin to kind of scale up and think about how it is that all of us get where we get in the Lower Mainland, for example. This dependence that we have on modes of transportation that are really unsustainable would be one example. And you think about that, you reflect upon it based on having just chosen a different mode of transport to get to school. And as I said, I think sustainability is a social movement. So my suggestion is that the classroom itself needs to break its habits in order to make a better contribution to sustainability. So we're going up one level to the classroom where there's 30 of us. And I really, really encourage people to think about a classroom in expansive terms and to challenge everything that goes on, including what I say, it's like, these are 13 weeks, these are 3 hours per week. Is this the best way to learn? We've learned this way for 400 years, but is this the best way to learn? And people get into it. And I say things like, what are we doing with our desks like this? Why are our desks like this? Is this the best way to engage in dialogue? Or is it better to take those things, pull them out of the floor and put them in a circle? So we just engage in that kind of thing. And then the idea is that potentially the movement itself changes the structure of society. So that's kind of how it goes anyways. Thank you.
Any other questions? I also encourage panelists, if you have questions for your fellow panelists, to please go ahead. Natalie, go ahead.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Really interesting to kind of hear the collaborations that are going on. I am curious, as a bit about myself, I'm actually a faculty member from UBC Okanagan, teaching in the Bachelor of Sustainability program here, so really interested in what's going on the other campus with these configurations. And one of the big kind of conversations we have on this campus, because it's such a small campus, is having kind of interdisciplinary programming ends up being both something that we sort of create in order to prepare our students for like all the panelists have spoken about, like a complex world that doesn't easily fit into these disciplinary silos, but also because we're a small campus and sometimes we don't have like the kind of human power to create like, a PhD in anthropology would be an example of the field I'm in. And so we have a lot of kind of debates and discussions on our campus about this term interdisciplinarity and whether we set up our students for success by giving them a sense of a discipline, or if we set them up to kind of not understand the kind of key tools of a particular discipline by kind of just making everything interdisciplinary. So I wanted to pick up on a couple of the threads mostly brought up by Jenny and also Denise. And many of you made reference to kind of students coming back to you after being in your classes and going out into their professions and coming back and saying, I ended up doing a lot more of this thing than I thought I would, or, this, systems mapping ended up being the most useful thing I learned. And I'd love to hear any of you comment on those kinds of questions around. I think that within universities, we try to sometimes produce miniature versions of ourselves, and many of us were trained in a specific discipline. So there's this kind of desire to pass that forward. I'm someone that wasn't, kind of like you were talking about, Jenny, where I'm like quietly, until I'm post tenure, don't want to talk about it so much necessarily. But I'm just curious about what the lessons learned about, students coming back, their reflections on disciplines versus not having disciplines, and just from, I think any of you could speak to these questions, but I'm very interested in kind of what you're hearing from those students, and your perceptions of the utility of disciplines kind of beyond the space of the university. Thank you.
I mean, I can start. I feel like it's important to have conversations with students about interdisciplinarity. So sometimes I think it's like we just assume that they're going to understand like the value of it, and that they'll just trust us, right? Because we're professors and they should just trust that we know what's good for them. So I think it's important to have open and honest conversations with students about the pros and cons of interdisciplinary based on their own career goals. So like I'm not gonna lie, like Natalie, I'm sure you know, as someone who goes on the academic job market with an interdisciplinary degree, I mean, that's really tough, right? And so, you know, I have to be honest with some of my students who are more maybe academic minded and thinking that they want to do master's, PhD, and potentially have an academic career. And I never discourage students from doing interdisciplinary studies because that's the path I took, and I think I'm quite successful, right? So, but I do think that it's important that students who are on the academic path know about some of the challenges that they'll face as interdisciplinary scholars so that they're prepared for that. And so that when they, as they're working their way through their PhD, postdocs, job market, that they're kind of aware that here's the extra work or the different work that you're going to have to do to be kind of accepted in this profession that largely determines or places people by discipline. I would say the value when I'm talking, you know, because most of our students aren't going to become academics, right? And so what's been really striking to me working with Gabriel on the engineering course, and the thing that I found very powerful is I feel like a lot of students, particularly maybe in the arts, are quite cynical or just really down on themselves, like, you know. And I think all the jokes about what are you going to do with an arts degree, and you know how many of us end up working in McDonald's or Starbucks, right? These like kind of negative stereotypes we have about the arts students not being employable. And I think one of the most powerful messages that I've had in talking with students who took the course and even during the course is like just it opened up their imagination to the types of work that they could do. I think a lot of, for example, poli-sci students think, oh, I'm going to go to law school. And like that seems to be like the default. I need to go do another degree. And I think when we can make it clear, particularly to art students or disciplines where students don't necessarily see their obvious career trajectory, I feel like these programs can really make them value their degree a lot more. Like I think the self-confidence that some of our students have, and one of our guest speakers works for a local engineering firm. And I mean, he hires geography students, and I think he hires geography students. He hires students from the social sciences into his engineering company. And I think that was such an eye-opener to students that like, wait, with a poli-sci degree, I could apply for an engineering job. And so I think for me, that's one thing that we can do a lot more of in terms of talking to students about interdisciplinarity and the value of it, is it gives them a bit more confidence in their skills, their degree, and their employability, which is really important. So that's all I'll say, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I can just kind of quickly on to that. So I come from a different context, right? So I come from engineering, and although I'm a big, you know, proponent of interdisciplinary education in engineering, there are some good reasons that we are disciplinarily siloed. In that when you go and do the technical work, you have an expected set of technical skills, and if you cannot do those things, and your bridge doesn't stand, your water doesn't get decontaminated, whatever the kind of field may be, right? So there's a core disciplinary identity and skill set that is in there. And in the case of engineering, we probably shouldn't touch much, right? Because those are things and the skill sets that we bring to the table, where there's, you know, the laws of physics they don't much care about our intentions. They care whether about something is going to kind of work or not. That said, what we do in engineering, we tend to do is to train our students in these particular technical skill set at the exclusion of others. And at the, you know, best cases, this is not deliberate. This is just, we have so much time in the curriculum. We have the accreditation of the programs to kind of worry about. So this is what we have to cover, and that's it. And in the worst case, purposely, as in we're the engineers, we're the best, everything else is just kind of window dressing and a waste of time. And so That's the bad side of it, right? So there's opportunities I find in kind of engineering, and I'm sure in science there's similar considerations, to at the very least create those opportunities to showcase the importance of what comes outside that skill set, not at the exclusion of kind of your own discipline, but look at those opportunities and the benefits that you have from being able to engage with others. So what Jen just said about an engineering company hiring kind of social scientists, yes, absolutely, because that's part of engineering work. And it's a big surprise to students because we don't show them that this is a valued skill set that contributes to this successful deployment of engineering kind of program. So I think we have to be kind of careful here. At least I'll only speak for myself here. I am, given my context, I'm not for a complete overhaul. Let's destroy kind of everything and everyone do the same interdisciplinary degree and pursue your kind of interest. There's kind of room for that. But there's definitely kind of opportunities here to make our programs better by appreciating what others do, by having an understanding, knowledge of what others do without being kind of expert, and not to eliminate disciplinary expertise, but to allow to place our own disciplinary expertise as part of a bigger collaboration to tackle these kind of projects. And that's what we don't do particularly well, and that academia is not super well built or organized to facilitate. I'll leave it there and wonder how many people I've offended with there.
I can add on to that as well. I think I echoed Jenny and Gabriel a little bit, and I think it is really important to have conversations, especially with our undergraduate students, of what they envision their lives looking like. We're a whole bunch of academics sitting here talking about, what opportunities are offered to our students outside of their undergraduate and graduate degrees, but we've all gone the academic route. And so we are so bounded by our disciplines because institutionally that's how it still operates. But, having that conversation with students, to say, what kind of work do you see yourself doing down the line? Do you want to pursue professional schools, professional degrees, and that kind of thing? Or do you see yourself working in other areas? I often tell my students, 80% of you will probably end up holding a job title that you don't know exists until you get it, right? Because, so few of us actually end up in the job that we think is the thing at the end of the path. And a lot of that comes, I think, is bred by the disciplines that operate within academic institutions, is because we say, you want to go to med school. I mean, med school is the one that is always, for my students, want to go to med school. And so not having then the full understanding and breadth of, say, the healthcare field in general and all the different things that you could do within that. And I also just wanted to comment, I don't know how it is in other faculties right now, but it's really interesting too, because there's a bit of a paradox that's created where the professional degrees and advanced degrees are incredibly competitive in the sciences, at least right now, very, very competitive. And, we have very, very high caliber students not getting into the programs that they're applying for after the first or second or third attempt. And the paradox being that these professional programs might be looking for very, very specific disciplinary expertise and a ton of expertise and experience within that. But then if you're not able to get into the program for various reasons of your learning potentials and that kind of thing, then are you at a disadvantage to other things that you might then want to try and apply for and explore outside of that narrow disciplinary field. So I think that becomes a little bit of a challenge as well to acknowledge, is that the journey may take you in a different direction than what you anticipated. And if we can have those standard competencies that Rob was talking about, or Gabriel's talking about within your faculty, what are the things that you need to make sure that you are able to do to be trained in that faculty, can the interdisciplinarity of your experiences actually provide a benefit then to opening up more doors down the line.
Thanks to all of you. Really nuanced answers that I think are bring a lot of nuance to the kind of boosting of interdisciplinarity that we sometimes see within the university, and the kind of the importance of these contexts and trajectories of students within it is so valuable. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie, and everyone. We can move forward to the question about, okay, what does UBC need to do, or other institutions, postgraduate, graduate institutions? How can they help support this kind of work? Easy question.
Should we go in the same order we started with, or
Popcorn. I like popcorn, so whoever wants to go first.
I mean, I unmuted myself, so I can just say it kind of real fast. Like we all kind of mentioned, these types of collaborations are not the norm. So to work on something like develop some interdisciplinary modules for a course, which I've done, then that's great. There's a space for this. We're recognized for, especially at UBC, if it's kind of related to education, we are recognized for educational innovation and educational leadership, and there's a whole list of terms to kind of characterize what we do, which is great. We've got places like the Sustainability Hub that can facilitate this. They can kind of fund this, help create those kind of networking opportunities. So at that scale, it's pretty good, right? Like there's a mechanism for this. But beyond this, Jen mentioned that like creating our course took a long time. And in part because it's new and people wanted to get their 2 cents in and kind of make sure that it was going to work, which is great. But also because the infrastructure to do this isn't really there. I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to teach this course again until recently, in part because this has financial implications. We have 2 kind of instructors kind of teaching one course that doesn't have a crazy number of students. How does that work, right? Who gets the kind of teaching credit, which kind of department or which faculty gets the kind of funding? What does it look like when we're evaluated for performance for the year or promotion or tenure or all that stuff when you're collaborating with someone, when you're kind of teaching a course, right? Like is this better because I get to engage kind of students that are not necessarily in my discipline, so that on the one hand that shows greater impact in educational leadership, on the other hand it's like, well, is it that, or are we just dabbling, and are we doing watered down engineering? So there's perspectives here that are different. So from the institutional perspective here, I think there needs to be a formal kind of mechanism that may or may not follow the kind of existing rules to facilitate this kind of stuff, and to have it officially kind of recognized as one of the priorities that we have. Like it's in the strategic priorities for UBC, transformative teaching, interdisciplinary kind of teaching, but we're still having a lot of difficulty in doing this. Otherwise, this is just in the academic culture. This, I'm less sure how we're going to kind of tackle this. But like we all kind of mentioned at some point, interdisciplinary is not always a positive word. If we have 2 of the 4 panelists here, or 2 of the 4 people who spoke today, rather, who didn't really want to talk about their background before getting tenure, like that's a problem. The fact that I hesitate, at approaching some of the leadership in the faculty here to say, look, this is kind of what I want to do, and am I going to be allowed to teach this? That's kind of problematic. So there needs to be more of these discussions, I guess, not necessarily with the people in this room, but kind of broader discussion on some of these opportunities to recognize that this is a good thing. Let's keep in the kind of broader conversation. Well, how do we create more of these things? And if every faculty kind of tries to kind of weave this into some conversation at some level, I think that's going to help in the kind of longer run. So yeah, I see a kind of logistical, structural kind of opportunities here to create something to facilitate this, but also a cultural shift that has to happen to value these kind of opportunities and make it just as a regular, yeah, that's what this person is doing. The latter one being not a pipe dream, but a bit more ambitious, let's say.
I could jump in, and I'm going to maybe pose this as a bit of a question to Denise, but are we dealing with a fully developed adult brain when we run an undergrad program? And if
No.
right, that's what well, that was a setup, but I just think we have to recalibrate post-secondary education, because right now an underlying assumption is that we're dealing with a fully developed adult brain. And if that was the case, then I can imagine we could be more confident in people's having made decisions about their lives. When a brain is still growing and people are still trying to learn, I think we should have a really, really different institution at work. I don't think people should be coming here till they're in their mid-20s. And I think we can set that up fairly easily. I think it makes more sense to look the way that we look if we have people that are really confident in the kinds of things that they want to do. I think our disciplines will kind of get blown away as a result. So people will come in and say, I want to do this because I've looked at it for 5 years and I really want to do it. And then the inevitable byproduct will be a changed set of programs, because the world is a complex place. And I think that we have to begin to experiment along those lines with our programs. And instead, we just keep doing what's been done for 400 years. And I just don't see it as producing people that are happy, people that are not anxious, people that are not burned out, people that are changing jobs, people that are looking to do other programs in vastly different areas because they made a mistake when they were 17. But who hasn't made a mistake when they were 17? So the tinkering has gone on for some time. I think it's time to actually, to take the expertise that Denise and others represent and to apply it to the way that we build our programs. It's like we don't have enough respect for the knowledge that we have within our place to develop programs based on that knowledge. It surprised me my whole career, and it doesn't matter what discipline. We could be talking about everything from the condos that are in South Campus through to to the impact that we have on a changing world. We just don't have the kind of confidence to say we know stuff and here's what we think as a result. And I think that's probably what we need to do in regards to programs. That was a quick one. So
I'll go. I echo a lot of what Rob has said, only because I've come from various educational models in my teaching that have attempted to flip things on their heads in that way and go back to the tinkering board and bring these young students along the ride. I think I agree that in undergraduate, the brain is too young and too inexperienced to really know how to, or what they want to tackle in the world, and a lot of it then is predicated on what's seen as being prestigious or secure, or what family members desire out of students. And those all have incredible places in our society, but in terms of longevity of the workforce and the actual change making that we're talking about, the coming up with solutions to the complex problems of the world, we're not necessarily creating the thinkers that are able to do that. And so I know in my very interdisciplinary classrooms, it's very much about creating that curiosity and that creativity, and to asking questions, like I mentioned earlier, rather than just the solutions. I think from an institutional level, we're between a rock and a hard place. Like Gabriel is absolutely right. It's been around for so long. It would take huge financial overhaul, restructuring, everything like that to be able to rewrite things. So I think when we say interdisciplinarity, one spot that it can start is within faculties. I think integrated sciences is a success story of an interdisciplinary approach that still exists within a faculty. So then we can keep the general scientific method as our disciplinary bound, but you get students that are integrating immunology with environmental science kind of deal, like a really, really broad spectrum of the fine minutia of the data that they're looking at, but it's still within this competencies of how do you apply the scientific method as an approach to quantifying, information and what that might be. And the integrated sciences has been around for 25 years, and we're now one of the most competitive programs within the Faculty of Science. Our students are some of the top within science at UBC, and we are finding that they're also some of the most successful to getting into the professional programs, and they come out with a degree in integrated sciences. It doesn't, they don't have a discipline that is attached to that, and yet we find that as long as they and we help them with this as well as training how to talk about their degrees, what they've done, giving them some foundation of how they might market themselves in a way that's meaningful at these different levels. But we find that in the real world, outside of academia, these candidates are extremely attractive to employers because they have something different, something that's not run of the mill. And I truly believe that that's what the employment world is looking for these days, in a huge, I guess, a degree. So
I'll go last, and I want to respond to the fully developed brain or not fully developed brain question as well. I mean, in Faculty of Arts, I'm not sure what it's like in other faculties, but it used to be that most students didn't declare their major till their third year. And we've seen a real shift in recent years in the arts of students now declaring in their second year. So many of the big programs in my faculty are now, requiring or encouraging students to major in a discipline in their second year, which, doesn't give them that same space to experiment and take those different classes. And so and it's hard. And I also, it's easy for me to say like, oh, well, just change your major or take, but students have financial constraints. Not all students can experiment and change their major and stay at UBC undergrad for 5 or 6 years. And so I think it almost makes the need for interdisciplinarity like even more urgent if the structure of our universities, and I agree, it'd be great to be able to transform everything, but and the current system is probably not going to allow for that. So given that the current system is kind of pushing students to make decisions about what their discipline will be at a younger and younger age, I think the imperative for interdisciplinary courses, spaces, etc., is, I think, even more pronounced. And so I just wanted to note that I think we need to have more of these types of courses and programs and opportunities for students as a way of pushing back against this, what we're seeing, this trend of forcing 18, 19-year-olds to decide what they want to be for the rest of their lives. So I just wanted to jump in on that because that's a concerning trend that I think we should be aware of, and the role that we have to play in making sure students are allowed to try other things despite the forces of the modern university. For me, the only thing I just want to really emphasize and what needs to be done is just, thinking about the incentives and the workload issues for doing this work. I mean, I think when I look at my research colleagues, if I was on a big SHIRK grant that was interdisciplinary, I'd be celebrated. Look at this wonderful, look at the wonderful work. And Jen's working with geographers and sociologists and philosophers. If I was bringing in a big research grant, my interdisciplinarity would be, I think, celebrated in ways that it's not celebrated when we do it in teaching. And so I think, and I don't know where that sits in terms of what is the role of CTLT in that. I know we have some folks from CTLT, but we also have people quite senior in our administration who are meant to be overseeing teaching and learning at the university. And I think they need to be brought into conversations to make sure that those of us who love doing this interdisciplinary work, I don't want it, when I say incentivized, I don't mean monetary incentives. I don't expect to be paid extra but it is extra work. And when we work in a discipline where there are these measurements of prestige and measurements of promotion, I think the undervaluing of interdisciplinary teaching when we compare it to interdisciplinary research is something that we need to be open and honest about, and particularly think about how are we going to make sure that the work that a lot of us do is recognized in the ways that it might be more in the research streams.
Like, if I can add kind of something, because I thought this was super interesting, this last kind of set of kind of responses about looking at, well, students are training for something and they're making a mistake when they're kind of 17 and kind of deciding what they want to do, and then the integrated science graduates are the ones that are most successful kind of going forward and go to professional degrees. And so I think the issue is that for any program, any faculty, any institution, if we are training students for one particular field and in a kind of narrow kind of view of what the job is they're going to do, and they're only qualified to do this, then we're failing as an institution. This is not should not be the point. Even for a technical kind of program like engineering, I teach chemical engineering, and so yeah, the context is a particular industry. But if I'm training my students and all they can do is this kind of narrow field and nothing else, then I failed as an educator, and then the department, and then the faculty, and then the kind of institution. So I think maybe this and this I see as a thread with kind of across everything that we've talked about. What the interdisciplinarity does is it provides these opportunities to explicitly look at beyond this idea, that this useful idea that we use, and use this for the development of very marketable skills like communication, like collaboration and teamwork. And so that's where the real value is. So I'll confess to being skeptical about these necessary overhauls of kind of programs, because I truly believe there is value in disciplinarity. Those graduates from the integrated science program are likely not, going to work as political scientists or as electrical engineers, but they can work in a wide variety of fields, and that's because they're marrying that technical training from the disciplinary side with those collaborative skills and those abilities to think and formulate hypotheses and analyze data and communicate. And that's what we should be kind of going towards, right? So the structure for that is there. So if we take everything that we suggested just in creating a space where these interdisciplinary opportunities happen, then it's a good way to maybe not shoehorn, maybe sneak in kind of opportunities for the development of those skills and an appreciation for what other people are doing. Because graduates of chemical engineering, they work in every industry. Again, they're not political scientists and all this, but they work, actually, a couple of them actually did go and work in kind of policy after. So I just want to make sure that we're not jumping on a kind of bandwagon here of disciplinarity is bad and let's kind of remove, right? And even if students, quote unquote, make a mistake, so we have people that graduate from an engineering degree, there's value in that if that engineering degree has kind of any value, and they go work in all sorts of industry after, but it is not wasted time. And I guess that's what I want to get out of this. Like, yes, sure, we can have kind of students later, but if we do our job well, there's value in that education, and I think by trying to innovate and do a better job, we're maybe not doing a credit to the good things that we are doing right now, and that's kind of what I wanted to flag there.
I also just want to call out the elephant in the room that this is a sustainability interdisciplinary panel, and I think one area where interdisciplinarity can really integrate into all of these different places is when you ask or teach students about the sustainability challenges of the world, because it is an interdisciplinary issue. And so sometimes just addressing inherently interdisciplinary issues from our different disciplinary backgrounds can still open up those avenues to considering from different perspectives, identifying stakeholders, and identifying the injustices that exist within a system. just calling attention to the sustainability hub as being the one that is having the conversation about interdisciplinarity. I think that's an important recognition within that we all have then commonality within this institution coming from all our different backgrounds.
I just want to pick up because I think it's interesting that we're really, even though it's a discussion on interdisciplinarity, we're still all kind of centering disciplines and what should students major in, what's their discipline. Whereas if you start from like question, kind of like Denise is thinking, if you start from the question with students of what problem do you want to solve, right? And maybe the problem they want to solve means like, yeah, they should just do like a computer science degree, right? Or they should just do a political science degree. So I think as well, like when we're thinking about these conversations of not continuing to center the discipline, particularly when it's around teaching, like what is the sustainability challenge you want to solve? Is it environmental? Is it food security, right? And starting in terms, and this is going back to maybe Natalie's question a little bit earlier, yeah, when we're discussing with students and advising them and mentoring them, instead of what do you want to major in, what is the problem you want to solve, and then working with students from there. And it might be Gabriel that, yeah, they just do a chemical engineering degree, but maybe not. It just struck me when you brought that up, how we've been centering disciplines.
So that's why I think, Denise, you said you're from Quest, right? Or like you worked there for kind of a few years. If I understand correctly, that's more the model that it was. They picked that like guiding question and then they explore this through multiple disciplines.
Yes, that's exactly. They had a keystone project, and often it would end up, being more in one discipline than others, obviously, quite naturally, and some were completely interdisciplinary. But that's exactly it. The Quest model was question everything, so it was all about picking something that they wanted to solve.
And student outcomes from that, like I'm not very familiar kind of with this, but
it was quite varied. Some were incredibly successful student outcomes. Others not so much. There were other institutional issues with just kind of the administration and how everything ran. But from an educational standpoint, we saw incredible engagement in the classroom. It was funny, Rob, that you said, how do people learn? Is it best if we're sitting in these aisles? And a Quest classroom always operated in a circle. That was just how we had conversation, and it was very discussion based rather than lecture based. They did their lecture learning outside of the classroom, so a flipped classroom style. But yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. What stays with me is still the question about if we are asking students what problem do you want to solve at 17 years old, how is that different when you ask them when they're 22 and they've had some more experience in the world? But that's how the system runs right now.
Well, I'll just get on that. I mean, as a 17-year-old, I didn't even know what a university had. Like you don't even know what's out there. And I think one of the things, you come into a panel like this and you learn about what we have. And it's incredible. I've been at UBC for 26 years. I don't know what UBC has. So how is it that a guidance counselor and a 16-year-old puzzle out what UBC has? And maybe that's a kind of intermediate step is really doing a better job of explaining the different pathways. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. My 16-year-old is adamant that there's only one way to get a BSc at the University of British Columbia because that's what she's heard at her high school, and that is the sciences. That's it. There's no other. And I say, well, what about land and food systems and forestry? And it's like, Daddy, you've made a mistake. That's not possible. Like, it's so maybe if we had a better sense of what's available, we could get students kind of investigating and coming up with some of their own pathways, which I think would be great. And that's kind of your history in the Sustainability Hub, Oliver's, is pathways, right? That's the foundation of the hub in some ways, was different pathways to sustainability. So yeah.
Okay, well we're nearly at 4:30. Any final comments or questions? Well, yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and our panelists. Thanks for sharing your time and your expertise. And seems like we could have more of these conversations, maybe with different audiences as well. Maybe there's a way to to explore that as well, so that people know what's going on at UBC, so that we can motivate other faculties to have maybe an interdisciplinary program like sciences has. I'm not sure. Maybe other faculty, maybe there are other faculties that do have that. I'm not.
Engineering does, yeah.
Engineering, okay. Good. So we're getting there. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.